Welcome to my channel, The Binge Eating Therapist. I'm Sarah, former binge eater turned psychotherapist, and my mission is to use this space to bring content to you to help you understand your struggle with food and break free from binge eating. Now today's video is a conversation with Natalia Staniszewska. Hope I've said that right. Natalia has overcome her own binge eating struggles, and she takes a very neuroscientific approach to binge eating recovery, which I'm all for. We don't always agree on everything, and there's a few things that she says that kind of stir me to pose some hard questions to her, which she takes really well. And actually when she explains herself, like I tell her to explain herself, and when she actually gives her side of what she's trying to say, we kind of end up back on the same page again. So she really takes my questions very well in a non-defensive way as well, which I really appreciate. I like having conversations with people that I don't necessarily 100% agree with, because I think that's how we learn, and we can usually find some common ground there. So a couple of trigger warnings that I just want to bring up front is there is talk of junk food and healthy food. So there's a bit of talk about morality around foods as good or bad. And there's also talk about intentional weight loss and how we might view that from a neuroscientific point of view. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. You can find Natalia over on Instagram. She is Binge Proof Brain over there, and she has a podcast that's also called Binge Proof Brain. And if you haven't checked out my podcast with Stephanie Michelle, what are you waiting for? It's called Life After Diets, and we talk about if we're not dieting, now what? And that is available on all major podcast platforms. So I hope you find this conversation interesting, and I will see you on the next video. Hi, Natalia.
Hey.
Thank you so much for agreeing to be on this YouTube channel. But I have to laugh a bit because I think I emailed you, or I messaged you on Instagram, I should say, like a few hours ago to ask if you were interested in recording.
Yes, indeed. And then we had a lot of troubles from my end with the technical issues. But yeah, it happens.
But we're here. That's the impatient streak in me. Once something is decided, I just want to get on with it.
Yeah, so, I get that.
Yeah. So speaking of getting on with it, I know you struggled with binge eating yourself, and I know now your whole job is around helping other people who are struggling with binge eating, a bit like me. So do you want to kick off and tell us a bit about your journey and what happened with you around binge eating?
Yeah, I think I will really try to keep it short because there were many like ups and downs and different, the story can go like different routes. But I would say that my issues with food probably started in the childhood. I already had like some weird behaviors, and in our household, we were all into like diet culture. I have mother who was always dieting, two older sisters, so dieting was like an issue. And also in our household, we also didn't really express emotions like normal people, but we just do it through food.
Can I just pause there? Is there like a normal people thing around emotions? Because I think all families are.
Yeah. What I think is like, okay, when my mother, when somebody's mother wants to tell them, hey, I love you, they tell that and they hug them. In my case, they would give me a cupcake.
I see. Yeah, so there was emotions were played out through food.
Yeah, definitely. But of course, I didn't like. Back then I didn't notice anything, and I think that I've noticed that my eating patterns are a little bit different when I was at the university. And at the university, when I was a student, I went on my first like diet, because then I started like compare myself to other people, and I've noticed that I eat like big portions. So I decided to just eat smaller portions. So that was my like diet. And I did successfully lose some weight, and I definitely looked better. But then I came back for holidays to my parents' house, and I think I was in a like low point, because when I came back to my hometown, there was nothing to do. So all I could do is like eat food. And back then during that summer, I had my like first like major depression episode. So I also started binging, probably as a result of restriction plus emotional issues. So for 3 months, I was just basically binging all the time at my home. And then again, when I came back to a second year at the university, things were slightly better. But again, I gained so much weight during those 3 or 4 months that it was totally visible that something was wrong. So I had like horrible acne, so mental issues, acne, weight gain, and I decided to do something about it. So my idea was that because I was a vegetarian, so I decided to even go further and go vegan. So because if you Google online, you know, what can cause, aggravate acne, they would definitely say that that milk products and so on. So that's why I wanted to ditch it. And I also knew that it might help me with my eating disorder, because I never had a trouble with sticking to my rules when it was about being vegetarian. So I thought that if I'm gonna be vegan, it's gonna be very similar. And it actually was. It actually just going like plant-based really helped me. But it helped me not because I sorted out my problems in my head, not at all. It's more because I just didn't eat my trigger foods, so to say. Because back then in Poland, there weren't many vegan junk foods. So I had to go on a very like clean diet. Again, I know that I'm using those terms. I know that we shouldn't use them, but I think that everyone can resonate because everyone knows what like clean dieting means.
So I think if we use inverted commas, we're okay.
Yeah. So for like 2 years when I was on a vegan diet, on like high carb vegan diet, I didn't really have binging episode. I think that my relationship with food was okay, but maybe from the outside perspective, that could look weird, because back then, I don't know, maybe some vegans remember that it was like years 2013, 14, 15. There was a girl called Freely the Banana Girl.
I remember Freely the Banana Girl. Yeah,
exactly. So I was sort of, similar in a way, because I was like drinking 10 banana smoothies in the morning and so on. And I got by this weird diet, like fruitarian diet or raw vegan diet, I just got very lean. So again, I would say that in my opinion, I didn't binge. My relationship with food was fine, but at the same time, I was on a very restrictive diet, and I also lost my period because, again, my fat, I didn't have enough fat on my body to actually ovulate, menstruate, and so on. So at some point, I decided that, okay, yeah, we have to do something about it, because I was over-exercising as well. So I think that on my 4th year at the university, before going abroad, I broke my collarbone, so I couldn't like exercise. And I decided that, I'm going to use this opportunity to like gain weight a little bit to get my period back. So I did. I moved to the Netherlands for 1 year to study as an exchange student. And then my binge eating started again, because in the Netherlands back then, they did have more like vegan junk food, and I was on a budget. So I figured that, so maybe I could be eating just more calorie dense foods. So when I incorporated those high calorie foods into my diet, I just got like this extreme hunger for them. I like couldn't stop myself from eating them. And at the beginning, for me, that was fine. I was like, I'm gonna gain weight like quite easily, and I thought that it's okay. But after a couple of months, when I stopped when I didn't exercise too much, again, I ate more fat, I ate more calories, my period came back. So I thought like, okay, so right now we can like relax with eating those junk foods in like enormous amounts, but I couldn't stop. And of course, I was also a student abroad, so I was lonely, and there were probably other emotional issues going on because I never sorted them out at the beginning. So after graduating from the university, I came back again to my hometown, and that's like sort of the worst place for me, like being with my parents, where my parents are doing everything for me and they are just like bringing food home. Like I have zero independence, not because I don't want to, but because like the situation. So again, I had, again, depression relapse. I decided to do not continue my career in neuroscience because I was like too depressed, too ashamed of myself, of binge eating and everything. So sort of like we could say that I hit the rock bottom. But at the same time, it's probably not the rock bottom because I still had hope that everything could get better. So I decided to like get out of that environment, and I even though I didn't have much money, I decided to like rent a place like 5 minutes from my parents, and I started my weird life again. I started doing being a horse riding instructor or giving kids like English lessons. So yeah, my life back then was a mess. I didn't know what to do with my life. But yeah, at the same time, that was the moment when I slowly started coming back to myself, because when I moved out from my parents, I could gain control over the food. So I started again eating healthy. Then I moved in with my grandma, and and from then there things started to get better. And at some point I also moved out. I decided to like run away from my problems and just moved to Belgium to work with horses. So yeah, it's the story is quite funny. There are many things. And from there I would say that that my relationship with food improved mainly through mindful eating, gaining awareness, like knowing myself better, because those months when I didn't really have a purpose in life, when I was depressed, when I had those little jobs, at the same time I had time to like really go inwards and like sort things out. So I think that was helpful. Okay, so I'm waiting for your questions.
Did you do that all on your own, the mindful eating and the inward exploration?
Yes. So yes, I did that everything on my own, because I'm sort of like a researcher. I really like to like even go on like PubMed and read the research papers about how to approach binge eating or other ways. I also had a background in neuroscience, so even my master's degree was on binge eating in rats during the stressful conditions. So like my whole my master thesis, my bachelor thesis was about ghrelin, which is a hunger hormone. So I was interested in nutrition back then. I also had a Polish YouTube channel all about like nutrition and related stuff about binge eating. I also talk about my binge eating on my Polish YouTube channel. So I did have a lot of like knowledge, but I needed to like started to incorporate it into my life.
So what were the main things, because we've got a researcher here who's done some live research, what were the main things then that you learned from your research about binge eating?
Yeah, I would say that just knowing the reward system, and that there are certain foods that really can evoke, higher desire for them. That was very helpful, because that took the responsibility a little bit out of me. Like, okay, maybe those foods were designed in that way. Also the research about neuroplasticity, how the habits work. Because again, because before that, I thought that I'm broken, everything is wrong. One time when I broke my collarbone, that was because I fell off the bike. I even thought that there's something was wrong with my brain, that, the satiety center in my brain was like turned off or something. And that's why I was binging and so on. So yeah, I started, instead of seeing it as something that I'm broken, that it's that I'm the problem, I started seeing it like, okay, I have those neurons in my head. I have those wiring. This is just a habit. I can rewire it. I can do some small steps that get me into the right direction. And this is what I did. Like slow and steady. I got out of it.
Mm-hmm. So your approach to me sounds really rational.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I often say, and I'm even thinking about using it as a title for my next book, is binge eating is not a rational problem.
Yeah.
Would you disagree with that statement?
Disagree. I don't think that it's a rational problem. I think that it's emotional problem as well. And throughout my story, I can see that. But for me, sorting it out on my own, that wasn't helpful. And I am like rational person, but I'm very well aware how important is this emotional part, how those rational and emotional part come together to create this wise mind. So I am aware of that. I still gravitate towards those rational things, even though I know that emotional part is super, super important. But again, in my story, it was less important at the time, because this emotional part, I did later, because later I also attended therapy and so on. So this came later.
Mm-hmm. So I find myself wincing when I hear you using terms like junk food and healthy eating, because those are terms that I've tried to move away from, just because of how problematic I found, like from an emotional perspective actually, and trying to make all foods as neutral foods.
Yeah.
However, I hear what you're saying around certain foods, you eat them and you desire them more in a way that you wouldn't with other foods. And I'm really struggling how to talk about that or think about that in a way that's not triggering to other people and even triggering to myself. Because the minute I start then thinking, oh, I should be eating less of certain foods, I find myself getting jumbled up with this stuff again. So this is how I've had to place it. What are your thoughts? I don't have a well-formed question there.
Yeah, I'm totally into body neutrality, also food neutrality. I do think that we should see food as just food, and not classify it as healthy, unhealthy, what you should be eating, what you should not be eating. So yeah, I definitely agree with that part. But I think that it is possible to foster this abundance mindset. And even if you have like certain like food restriction, you don't have to see them as restriction, because this is what happened to me, right? I'm still vegan. I'm still on like restrictive diet. Many people would say that it's restrictive diet, but I do not see it that way. So I think that it matters a lot how what's our interpretation. And I do think that that it's important to neutralize all the foods and start seeing them as just food. But also, let's do not like dismiss the part that some foods are may have addictive like properties. I think that is also just keeping that in mind. It doesn't mean that that you shouldn't eat them, but just do it more strategically and maybe be aware that, hey, when you eat that, maybe you won't feel as satiated. Maybe try to balance it with something. Yeah, so that's sort of my approach.
The way I started talking about it is that it's more about the way I eat these foods.
Yeah, intention. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And so for me, it's really important that there's some level of presence. Doesn't mean I have to sit there. I did for a long time, let's say a long time, a couple of months when I was in my recovery. All these foods that I knew were problematic binge foods for me, and they were always the high sugar foods. Those were the ones I was drawn to. For a few months, I was like, I'm allowed to eat them whenever I want. The only condition is I have to sit at the table, and I do it without distraction. Yeah. And I did that for a few months, and it really did help shift something for me with those foods. But now it's even like in certain moods. And I can tell, so I don't know if this is something you can relate to or not. I can tell that now quite clearly that when an urge for a certain food is compulsive or not. It feels different. There's like an agitation in my body about wanting this food. And when I feel that, those are the times that I need to go into the urge and accept the urge and be like, this is not going to help me to act on this particular urge, compared to on another occasion where, I don't know, I might with some friends and I want to go for a coffee and a cake, and it's a completely different experience. So those are the things I think I need to, but your posts, and there was one that you posted, it was quite a while back, but I remember it because I just loved it. You put something like, trying to tell someone with an eating disorder to just eat intuitively is like trying to tell someone who's depressed, just be happy.
Yeah.
So when somebody is struggling with food, like for you then in the work that you do, where do you start with someone? Someone comes to you and they say, I'm struggling with binge eating. What's the first thing you want to know?
Yeah, I think that I try to meet people where they are at. So at the moment, because maybe my social media is a bit confusing, I do meet a lot of like different people. Some of them struggle with restriction. Then it's obvious that you have to start there, like break this binge restrict cycle. If somebody is like afraid of calories, or maybe they do still like count calories, then of course this is the moment to start. But with other people, maybe there is totally something else, that they are already they already like eat like eating is sorted out. They know that those foods are not that bad, or they are not like avoiding them, but still from time to time they will binge. So I think that I try to again, like really get to know the person, and just they have to sort of like sort it out. I'm just there to guide. I'm not telling them exactly what they have to do. I just always like give them, hey, maybe consider this, consider that. Would you like to do this? So yeah, I did like introduced many of my clients to intuitive eating, because they didn't know that. I introduced my clients to like all-in approach, when you just allow yourself to eat food. But again, it's their decision whether they want to go with that. And I don't have like any agenda. I do not like guide people through the program, like this is first step and we're going that way. I'm trying to just adjust the approach to each person.
What are your thoughts about all-in recovery on the whole?
I loved it. I loved the Stephanie Buttermore, like the whole series. I know that for some people it works, especially for people who maybe suffer from hypothalamic amenorrhea and so on. I do think that in these cases it might work, but again, there are certain things that you have to take into consideration. Maybe you already use food for emotional reasons. Maybe you don't have support. Maybe you're not ready for a weight gain. This is something that I did, right? I didn't know back then that it's all in approach. I did something similar, right? But I didn't have this emotional stability. I didn't have support. I wasn't ready for that. So I did make many mistakes along the way. But maybe if I would know about Stephanie Buttermore, maybe if I would read about it more, and instead of like YOLOing it, like, oh yeah, let's just do it, like prepare myself, then maybe my story would be totally different, and I wouldn't end up binge eating. I would just end up like restoring my weight and just continuing with life. Mm-hmm. So yeah, in general, I do love it, but I do like it, and I think that it might help some people, but I don't think that it's for everybody, because for everybody for some people that would be just a permission to binge, like, oh yeah, now you can eat whatever you want, go take away, spend money on on food and so on.
Mm-hmm. So it seems like your neuroscientific approach, you focus quite a bit on beliefs, changing beliefs and belief systems. Do you want to talk a bit about what neuroscience says about that, about being able to, because what about those beliefs though, that they've been around for like 20 years? Because people might look at you and go, well, you're quite young, you struggled for a few years. I've been struggling for 40. I get people, that have been struggling longer than I ever did. And I think there's a slight sense of, can you really relate to me when I've been struggling with this for 30, 40, maybe even 50 years?
Yeah. What's exactly the question?
I suppose it's like, what does neuroscience tell us about what's possible when it comes to changing beliefs that are that entrenched and they've got that much emotion around them, holding them in place?
Yeah, I think that if there's a willingness, then everything is possible. We know much about like neuroplasticity and how the brain can rewire itself, how we can change the circuits and so on. But let's be honest, we don't do those experiments on like humans. So we assume that what we see in animals, that this is also possible in humans. But I think that even like talking therapy, when we compare people in fMRI machine, how their brain changes, like we can see changes in the brain. So I think that it is all possible to change those beliefs. And I think about them as a mental habits. Again, you thought certain thoughts about yourself, like, okay, I'm not good enough. your primitive brain noticed that, okay, this is a pattern we are repeating, and it took it, and now it just repeats itself as a broken record. But I think that you can like install new thought. But of course, you have to do it. It's not as easy, right? You cannot jump from one statement to another. You have to do like those bridging statements and so on, so that the new thought is believable, and just work on it. And people want to do that, even though they struggled for 20, 30 years. I think that most of them still have hope that this is possible, because they are still searching, still following me, you. So I think that because of those people have hope and because they have willingness, I think that it's totally possible for them to recover from binge eating and also change those beliefs.
So you mentioned the bridging thought. So I just wanted to quickly, for people watching who might not have heard that expression before, and it's this idea, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, of when you want to change a thought, you can't just introduce the exact opposite thought and try and make yourself believe it. So you try and, it's like a bridge from one thought to the other. You start trying to move towards it. So it might be like, I hate my body and I'm disgusting, could turn to, I don't really like my body, and I'm willing to figure out a way to feel a bit more comfortable about that.
Yeah.
And the idea being that you practice the new thoughts and you move towards the new one.
Yeah, exactly. So from like negative thought, first you try to get to like neutral, but also through those bridging statements. Yeah.
What does, if you know the answer to this, kind of, what would neuroscience, or how would neuroscience explain that idea of when we know something rationally in our brains to be true, but we don't feel it?
I think that this debate is really a debate amongst like neuroscientists. I think that this is something deeper, and I don't know like the exact answer, how to say it, but it's enough for us to like know that this is happening. Okay, this is happening, so this is real. Whether we know why is that or not, I'm not sure. But again, something like this explains, and what we can do is we can adapt and expect that this is happening, and sort of decide how we want to go about it.
Yeah. So there's one question I know I've really wanted to ask, because I remember it happening on Instagram when you kind of changed your bio and you shifted your focus of your page a little bit, and some people got upset. So I think how I'm going to word this is, do you think that in order to recover from binge eating, you need to not focus on weight loss to begin with? Or do you think those two things can go side by side?
No, I don't think that those things should go together. Like, first, let's deal with binge eating, because if you are on a calorie deficit, then of course your primitive brain will want to binge. Like this is survival mechanism, right? So I would say that first deal with binge eating, then go into maintenance mode, like for even a couple of years. Then you can gently start approaching weight loss if you want to. But yes, definitely I wouldn't combine binge eating recovery with intentional weight loss. Usually those two totally clash.
Yeah. And I think that's where people misunderstood what you were trying to do. Because you did say that you were going to talk about weight loss on the page, and there are people who are struggling with binge eating who are like, that's not right, you shouldn't be doing that. And I was just watching it unfold, just with curiosity, really, to see like what path you ended up going down.
Yeah. So yeah, for a moment I wanted to go into that, because again, most of the binge eating issues, they do start with restrictive diets. So I would like to provide people like a good approach to weight loss, something that is sustainable, that is not restrictive or very radical. I wanted people to have like the access to like reasonable weight loss protocol. But again, I'm still like trying to figure it out, what I want to do, whether I want to work with people who struggle with binge eating, or maybe just overeating, emotional eating. Yeah. I'm still trying to figure this out.
Well, because I think I said to you on our Instagram messaging, like, I see your posts and I'm like, yes. And you're not talking about weight. You're not mentioning weight in your posts itself. But then in your bio, I think it's kind of like, I suppose I found it hard to know where to place you. I'm like, this woman clearly knows some really helpful information here, because I think the neuroscience side of things are incredibly helpful for people struggling with this, to try and understand what's going on in your brain and to figure out ways that can possibly be changed. I think offers a lot of hope for people, really.
I agree. And I also agree that my social media is still confusing. I think that my initial wish was to create a space that, again, I would help people stop overeating so that they can lose weight easily. So the losing weight wouldn't be the first thing, but more like something that is a side effect. Because this is what happened with me, right? When I stopped binge eating, I naturally released weight. I would say so. So so that was my intention, to show people that, hey, the main issue you have right now is that because you are overeating. So when we address that issue, it's going to be easier for you to again maybe come back to your set point weight and so on.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's what I believed was going to happen for me. Because my binge, I wasn't doing much restriction. I was binging a lot. I was convinced that when my binges stopped, that the weight was going to just fall off me. And it never did. You know, like maybe there was a little bit of balancing out, but very little. And anytime I even think about approaching weight loss again, my eating goes awry, and I have to immediately let it go and go like no.
Yeah.
So I think that's where people get stuck, because I see it all the time when I'm working with people, like they start making great progress in their relationship with food, and it's getting much easier. And then they might notice that their clothes are feeling a bit more comfortable or a bit looser, or they might decide to step on the scales to have a look. And that is almost always derailing, because if they've lost perhaps more or as much as they thought that they had, they can get a bit excited and start overthinking the food again, and like some of that intuition that they tapped into gets lost. And then if they haven't, they were so convinced that that was what was going on, that's also derailing. So how do you think about that situation?
Yeah, I think that all of it requires a lot of like mind management to really decide ahead of time, what do you want to think about it? Like, what do you want to think about yourself when you step on a scale, and like really maybe prepare yourself. But again, I think that most of the people try to approach weight loss like too early. Like, it takes a lot of time to like go into the maintenance and maybe forget about like weight loss for a while, because I also had to do that, because I just gave up on like losing weight. All I wanted to do is like, okay, let's try to just maintain what we have. Let's try to stop, do not gaining more. So this is hard, because I know that people want to compare themselves, because on social media we may see like athletic women saying that, oh yeah, in the past I struggled with binge eating and now I'm athletic and lean, so that's also possible for you. But probably it's not possible for everybody. It all depends on many different factors, and also on your set point weight. Some people are just genetically predisposed to maybe having different physique, and it also depends how long somebody was stuck in this restrict binge cycle, because the longer you were there, the more like you restricted, the more your brain is gonna be like sensitive to restriction, even like small amounts of mental restriction. So again, I think that it's just personalized, because at this point, for example, when I put on myself like some kind of like restriction, for example, for a while, I didn't drink coffee because I wanted to do the caffeine detox. So I also didn't eat chocolate because chocolate contains caffeine, and I was fine, right? I just told myself, even though I eat chocolate like daily for past like 3-4 years, I've been eating chocolate daily. But for that month, when I said no caffeine, I was like, okay. For a couple of days, I had to like, struggle with urges, but then they passed. So I think that in my case, some kind of small restriction, it doesn't derail me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But so, again, personalized issue.
So you mentioned urges.
Yeah.
So what would somebody with a neuroscience background say about urges? What advice would you give to people who want to figure out? Because what I hear is people saying they want to get rid of the urges.
Yeah.
And for me, accepting that they weren't going to go was actually the way that I made peace with them. But I'd be kind of curious how you think about urge management
Yeah, I think that it's very important, and it's also useful in your day-to-day life because you may have urges to grab your phone to do something. So I think that in general, having this skill of urge surfing is very useful. And a couple of questions ago, you asked me about this research I did about like neuroscience, and that was one of the things that was important part of my journey, because I read a lot about OCD, and I found like it's kind of like, for me, it was useful to compare like OCD urges with urges to binge. And I think that then I was introduced to a concept of urge surfing and like labeling what is happening, and recognizing it and trying to sit with the feeling. So that was something helpful for me, and also I think that it's right now helpful for other people. And again, urge is just a feeling, so it also helps you with dealing with other feelings, with like having that willingness to feel them, to accept them, to do not judge them. So I think that it's just urge surfing, or dealing with urges, is that this one piece of the puzzle that is important. But of course, other pieces are also important, like, body image issues, not restricting, mindful eating, and so on. So urge surfing, important, but it's not just about urge surfing.
Yeah. I think for me, the thing that kept me stuck for a while was I got the idea of urge surfing because I'd done it a few times. But it felt like, okay, I might manage this urge today, but it's just going to come back. Mm-hmm. That was the thing that was going on in my brain all the time. It was almost like, well, what is the point in fighting? Because this, I think, is key, because I was fighting with it. Fighting with this urge now, when it's just going to come back again tomorrow. It's going to come back again later. It's going to get me at some point. So I might as well just give into it now.
Yeah.
When actually, if you give into it or you don't, either way, it was going to come back, right? But that was what I told myself. That was one of the ways I would talk myself out of trying to surf those urges.
Yeah. So let's say that you have that urge, but you do not reward it with food, and you do it a couple of times. Your brain wants to be efficient. It won't, waste energy to throw those tantrums, to send those urges. Like, okay, your brain at some point gonna recognize, like, okay, I guess that nobody's gonna reward us for sending those urges, so it's gonna back off, and those urges may feel less potent, and they will happen less often. So it's gonna back off. I think so, right? Because right now I know many people who recovered from binge eating, and I don't think that they have urges. I don't have urges, though I do have, cravings, sometimes emotional eating, something, but it's not like this overwhelming urge. So I think that it's totally possible to dismiss those urges and have hope and be consistent with it, be patient, and that will go away. It will be, less and less. I think so.
Mm-hmm. I love that phraseology. Like, your brain wants to be efficient. It doesn't want to waste energy on this stuff. Once it accepts that actually this is not getting the reward that I'm calling out for.
Yeah.
So I think that the anti-diet movement would say that any pursuit of intentional weight loss is pretty much going to amount to a diet, because you're trying to eat in a deficit. Mm-hmm. How would you think about it from that perspective, like weight loss and diets, and how would you imagine that a neuroscientific approach to weight loss is different from that?
I don't think that is different. It's all about, energy balance. You do have to get into that energy. You do have to get into calorie deficit. And first of all, I want to say that anti-diet movement, super important. We need to have people who shout different things, so that we are exposed to like different opinions, because right now for years we were stuck in this diet culture. So I think that anti-diet movement is super important. But I think that we all have the body autonomy, and we can do whatever we want to do. If we like the reason why we are doing it, it's fine, and it's possible to do it from like self-care perspective, because again, I'm privileged to live in like socially accepted body, but I don't know what a person who weighs way more, what they are feeling, so, and how they are perceived by society. So I do understand that some people may really want to pursue weight loss, and especially when it's related to their health, to the possibility of what they can do in life, because we've read so many stories how ashamed people are to ask about like this belt on a like additional belt on a flight. So those are the things that I've never I'd never encountered that in life, so I don't know how it feels to be to feel that way. So again, I'm not in the position to tell somebody like, no, you should love your body, you shouldn't approach weight loss, and so on. So I do believe that everybody has to make the decision for themselves.
Yeah, and I would never say that somebody shouldn't try to lose weight, but the thing is, like, what happens when you do is what I often ask people to ask that question, to find out for themselves, because what we see over and over again is that quite often the pursuit of weight loss for the majority of people doesn't work, and for a certain number of those people, they'll actually gain weight through attempts of that. Do you think it's possible that somebody who's been struggling with this for many years, has gone through many cycles of restriction, that their brain is always going to, at some level, deep primal brain, not necessarily thinking brain, is going to react to an energy deficit in a way that's problematic through binging? Because that's my fear, is that that could be true. And so there might be some people for whom it really isn't ever possible for them to focus on trying to eat in an energy deficit.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question. What's possible, what's not. I think that that person should, ask themselves, like, is it helpful? Because if they are trying to lose weight, but those are like all the time failing attempts, then maybe it's better to let go. If there are more like negatives to it than pursuing weight loss, maybe not a good idea, and it's better to like accept the current situation, because I don't know. I haven't met yet people who okay, yeah, you ask about weight loss, so I haven't met people who've been in that cycle and they want to like lose weight. So yeah, I don't have even like personal experience with that kind of people.
Yeah, it's such a tricky one, and it's such an important subject because it's so important to so many people.
Yeah, it is very tricky.
Yeah, there are people for whom their weight makes it difficult to navigate their way in the world for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm definitely on the same page as you. There's no kind of people should or shouldn't do anything. I'm always for people, try it out, see what the information, try and make sense, but just don't blame yourself if you're falling back into this, because there'll be something going on, like at the neurological level, right? Whenever we go back to binging, there's something going on.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I suppose we're coming up to time now. But thank you for sharing all your pearls of wisdom. So if somebody was watching this and maybe they've just found out that binge eating is a thing, and they're trying to figure it out and what it means, what would you say to somebody who wants to start the journey of recovery but doesn't even know where to begin?
Yeah, Google. Just Google something, anything. From one information you will get to another. And unfortunately, I still think that sort of like diagnosing yourself through Google is in a way simpler, because I know that sometimes when you go to the doctor, they might dismiss you if they don't really know, because everybody knows about anorexia, bulimia. Binge eating is not that well known. So actually, I would recommend people, to go online and look for support online. Maybe going into like Facebook groups at least, or maybe reading something on Reddit. I think that it's super helpful to just to be able to relate to other people, and from there, again, somebody can explore some self-help books, some maybe courses, and then trying with with a health professional, right? Therapist, binge eating recovery coach, and so on.
Yeah, go out there and absorb as much information as you can. That's what I often say to people as well. And I think hearing people's stories is a big part of that.
Yeah,
I think there's something about when you hear someone's story, you've kind of got permission to take what you want from it and leave the rest, as opposed to somebody dictating like do these 10 steps in this order and you'll be fixed.
Yeah.
So okay. Well, Natalia has a fantastic Instagram account. I'm going to link to all her stuff below, and she's got a podcast, which I'll mention at the beginning. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you for giving up your time at such short notice and for coming on and sharing all your wisdom.
Yeah, it was very fun. Thank you for having me. I hope that somebody found it helpful.
Thanks, Natalia.